Experts in nuclear energy have come together in Sydney for the first hearing into the use of nuclear energy in Australia. The inquiry is trying to determine if nuclear energy is feasible, suitable and use in Australia as a power source. Joining us now is LNP MP Ted O'Brien, Chair of the committee. Ted O'Brien, thank you very much for joining us this morning. So can I take the temperature, the mood for change? Is there an interest? I mean, there is obviously an interest in it, but I mean, you've been out there, you've been talking to the people, you've had this inquiry. Where is it at? How is the temperature at the moment when it comes to nuclear?
Well, Pete, firstly, delighted to speak to you this morning. The temperature's good, and I say it's good because for the first time in a long, long time, we seem to be having a debate about a highly contested issue of energy in this country without the hysteria, without the hyperbole, and I think that's a really good sign. The more that we can keep this debate based on evidence and fact and void of emotion and ideology, the better. So yesterday, and we had some of the key people who play in the nuclear space in Australia in front of us, including Dr. Ziggy Switkowski, and then, of course, ANSTO, who manages the existing nuclear reactor that we do have in Australia.
So why do you think that there's no hysteria this time around? Why is that? Do you think people are kind of warming to change about the potential, and let's talk about some of the positives here, good, clean energy, and which would ultimately be cheap energy, I suppose, and there's also many jobs to be had as well. Yeah,
Pete, look, all the above, and it might be too early, since yesterday was really day one, to say that there won't be any loud, emotional voices in this debate. You know, energy at the best of times gets people passionate. Nuclear energy, on top of that. But so far I've been pleased there hasn't been the hysteria, and I think there's been two major game changers in this. Number one, people are genuinely concerned about climate change, and it has traditionally been environmental groups who have protested against nuclear energy. But you can't on one hand call for the decarbonisation of the economy. You can't on one hand believe that we face an existential crisis of life itself, and then on the other hand say you don't want to consider the cleanest form of energy the world has ever seen. The second change really is the technological advances. The days of looking at the old mass, huge scale power plants are gone when it comes to nuclear. Now the debate is much more focused on small modular reactors. The old days of stacks are gone. They're not even within scope for this inquiry.
Well, I mean, we had a conversation on our show yesterday about a report out of the Australian Financial Review 2 days ago about Rolls-Royce wanting to get involved, and it wants to put in a nuclear plant here in Australia that it says can be done for less than $3 billion. It can be transported here on shipping containers and could be done, you know, within the next 10 years or so. So there is new technology that needs to be explored. However, we've spoken about the positives, Ted O'Brien, but we should also talk about the negatives when it comes into this debate, because no one wants to live near one, right? So there's the problem with waste that becomes radioactive, and of course there are security threats around nuclear facilities as well. So how do you overcome those hurdles?
Well, ask us in a few months' time when we finish the inquiry, but you're dead right. We need to be going into this inquiry with independence, with our eyes wide open. And that's why where we look at the prerequisites for a future Labor government, coalition government to introduce nuclear energy, it comes down to two things. Is it feasible for Australia to have nuclear energy? In other words, does it stack up on economic, technological and capability grounds? And secondly, is it suitable for Australia? So does it make sense on safety, environmental and security grounds? If we can answer those questions, then we're going a far way to further this debate. It is a debate, though, that has to happen. We cannot be technology agnostic in this country and then at the same time say we refuse to debate one of those sources of energy, being, of course, nuclear.
Yeah, I mean, there is a ban in place that has been in place for a while. Do you think, how do you rate the potential of that ban being overturned?
Well, the government has made it very clear that the moratorium that is in place, and it is a bipartisan moratorium, will remain in place. And that's an important condition of this inquiry, because it allows us to focus on the long-term future of energy in this country without people jumping to conclusions that suddenly there's a recommendation to change.
Yeah, and also, Ted, how it works, sorry to interrupt you, how it also works with, wind and how it also works, with other parts of the energy sector.
Indeed, we've got to do the comparison. And look, one of the things that came out yesterday was the need for us to be very careful about how we compare different sources of energy on the economic front. There's an enormous amount of renewables coming into the system at the moment, and Australia is proud of the fact that it's leading the way. On a per capita basis, no other country is investing in renewables like Australia. However, and this is one of the points today by a few people giving evidence, the more renewables that come online into the system, the more dispatchable energy you need. And that is because a lot of the intermittent renewables, well, they're variable. And when you have variable sources of energy, so in other words, when the wind doesn't blow and the sun doesn't shine, you need to have them firmed up. And that's where dispatchable energy comes in. And so one of the key challenges, I think, for this inquiry is to make sure that as we place an economic lens over the different sources of energy, we must do so on a system basis. It's not as simple as saying, well, what's the cost of wind, what's the cost of nuclear, what's the cost of coal. It needs to be looked at from the customer's point of view, from the systemic end. So that was a good lesson for us to learn on day one.
All right, yeah, day one, plenty to go. Ted O'Brien, Chair of the Committee, appreciate your time, unfortunately, but look forward to having you back on the show to talk more about that as that inquiry progresses. So thank you very much, and as you say, it's a debate that's well worth having. Thank you, Ted. Talk to you soon.